So here's the deal. In less than 10 minutes, I'm going to show you how to take your drums and level them up completely. Now, I love getting to say shit like this when I know it's true and not just YouTube hype. If you're a more advanced producer, you might know these techniques, and if so, this video might not have a whole ton for you. But if you are a beginner to intermediate producer who you maybe are a little fuzzy on some music fundamentals, this video will absolutely accelerate your drum programming by the end of it. I promise. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So to start off, I'm just going to play these hi-hats for you. It is an eighth note pattern and they're hovering at around 64 velocity. Great, right? It's there, it gets the job done. Now, let's say that I go ahead and I take these three hits of the hi-hat, falling on beat 1, the and of 2, and beat 4, and I'm just going to double their velocity to about 120. Now let's listen to this pattern. Do you hear how that has a sense of pulse to it? It is certainly musically more interesting. What we are talking about here is an accent pattern. This is a 3-3-2 accent pattern, called as such because we have 3 eighth notes followed by 3 eighth notes followed by 2 eighth notes, 3-3-2. And we feel that sense of division because the first eighth note in each group is accented. Now, how we translate that to the DAW, the most common way is through velocity. By raising up the velocity, our notes become louder. Therefore, they become accented. If you want to create more interesting, more compelling drums, you need to use accent patterns. So now that we understand what an accent pattern is, let's talk about how you can use it to almost instantly improve the drums that you're producing in your songs and beats. So the first step is actually figure out what your accent pattern is. So I've laid out a pattern that I'm going to use here for this example on the clap of a 909 drum kit. So let's listen. Now, if I add in the rest of the drums, which are outlining a pretty straightforward house beat, we can hear the impact that the clap pattern has on our sense of pulse, our sense of groove. Now, if I take that accent pattern away, this beat gets a lot more boring, frankly. It's very motoric, very machine-like. Now, that we can listen to for a long time. If I were to just play this clap with this drum pattern, this wouldn't necessarily cut it for a 3-minute, 4-minute song. Now, it's great for a section, but songs change. Songs have different senses of movement, of feel. And so how do we ensure that our accent pattern is audible and making an impact without it being annoying, right? This is where we rely again on our friend velocity. So one thing I could actually do is take my accent pattern and nest it in the hi-hats, for example. Now, just by moving those MIDI notes up from the clap to the hi-hat, they're at a higher velocity than the hi-hats were. So already that accent pattern is standing out. I'm going to play this now and leave it highlighted for you so that you can visually see what you're hearing. It's such an immense groove, and it's an uptick compared to the straight motoric hi-hats that we had before. So one way to use your accent pattern is to nest it in your hi-hats. It's a technique that I use all of the time. Now, another way to leverage accent patterns in your drum programming is to distribute the pattern throughout the kit as opposed to keeping it on one drum the entire time. For this example here, I have the accent pattern distributed amongst the 2 kick drums in this kit as well as the hi-hat. Let's give it a listen and let's talk about how it is subtly different from resting the accent pattern all in one drum. Now, this perceptibly does a couple of different things. First, it makes the accent pattern not as obvious, which you may want to use that musically for a section. That sense of pulse still exists. It's still far more interesting than everything the same velocity, but it's not as straightforward. And because we are distributing the accent pattern amongst the kit, the way that I personally perceive it is almost like 2 smaller patterns. Starts on the first kick drum, moves up to the second kick drum that has not nearly as much low end in it. Then we jump up to the hi-hat. Then we move back into the kick drum for 2 hits, and then go up to the hi-hat. So it almost feels like the pattern is divided into 2 halves. Listen again with that in mind. When we zoom out and think about the context of your entire song, a great way to leverage your accent pattern is to move it around as the song progresses. It's an excellent and easy way to differentiate sections using your drums while still making everything feel cohesive because that pattern carries through. In this example, in the first measure, the pattern starts on the clap. Second measure moves to the hi-hat, and third measure is distributed, like we just heard. I have the rim shot muted so that you can visualize where the pattern is as it moves around. Each of those have a completely different feel from one another, and each could be used for a different section of your track. The final point that I want to impress upon you in this video is that when you know and understand what your driving accent pattern is for your song, you can begin to then leverage it in other areas of your song. Take, for example, this pad that I have laid out. It's just a simple wavetable pad that is playing chords that last 2 measures each. Let's listen alongside the drums. Now let's listen when I add in shaper that is modulating the position of the filter cutoff with the same accent pattern. Now I know the magic of YouTube makes this seem instantaneous, so you have to take my word with how long it takes me to put something like this together, but it took next to no time because I knew going into this what my accent pattern was. It was easy enough to dial in shaper, modulate the filter, and create a really compelling companion element to my drums. If you're ready to learn more techniques like this that take the guesswork out of songwriting and help make you a more prolific producer, you should check out my new course, Step-By-Step Songwriting Music Theory for Producers. Enrollment is currently open for the first cohort and will close this coming Monday, November 18th. It covers this technique and so many more fundamental music concepts that allow you to make your songs better, faster, easier. You can head to my website, zwbuckley.com, or go to the link in the description to learn more. And as always, like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you next time.